some snacks?
Zenless Zone Zero is a game that comes with inherent caveats when discussing it. It's a game that, in theory, you could spend dozens upon dozens of hours in without spending a dime since it's a free download. It's also made to run on anything from a smartphone to a PlayStation 5 Pro, so the game's scope and content will inevitably be defined by the limitations of less powerful hardware, in order to offer parity between versions. I went back and forth for a while about whether or not I wanted to talk about this game in any sort of critical manner. Does the game's status as a free download shield it from criticism? It certainly makes getting the player's foot in the door easier, and if you put time into the game and realize it isn't for you, you can excuse it by falling back on the fact that you didn't have to spend any money for that experience. However, our time is also valuable. We shouldn't be reductive and equate the meaningfulness of an experience purely to the ratio of hours per dollars paid. Some of my favorite games of all time are on the shorter side, because they left a deep impression that stuck with me even after the credits rolled. All this is to say that Zenless Zone Zero, despite being free, felt like a game that was not being respectful towards my time as a player. When discussing the game itself, especially with those who aren't familiar with it, it's important to make it as readily apparent as possible that, quote, the game is a free download is only half of the story. Zenless Zone Zero possesses the monetization strategy of what is called a gacha game, where players are incentivized to convert real-world money into digital currency, which they can then use to spin a slot machine in hopes of attaining a new character or weapon. There is no sugarcoating this. It literally is just gambling, but instead of playing for monetary returns, you're trying to unlock a game's content. To say this is a predatory business practice would be an understatement. It is effectively hiding behind the plausible deniability of being a free download, while simultaneously extracting money from those who are vulnerable to the ways in which the game is engineered. If you struggle with addictive behaviors or impulse control, especially if it comes to spending money, everything else I say in this video should be an afterthought. Don't even bother with this game. Gacha games will often advertise themselves as promising 200 free pulls if you download today, but in Zenless Zone Zero, this has a large asterisk attached, since the free digital currency is often drip-fed to you over the course of either real-world days or hours of in-game playtime. The latter wouldn't be a problem if the gameplay was fun, but most of the time it just isn't for me. I've tried 3 different Hoyoverse games: Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and Zenless Zone Zero, and from a gameplay perspective, they all have one thing in common. They are uninteresting, often derivative attempts at their various genres. Zenless Zone Zero, for its part, is trying to be a hack-and-slash RPG, along the lines of Devil May Cry and Nier Automata. While those games have fun and varied combat, Zenless Zone Zero just feels so monotonous. From a visual perspective, the characters animate really well and there's some great effects work, but you can only see the same 2 or 3 attacks so many times before it all just becomes visual noise. This feels like an inevitable consequence of the game being available on smartphones. You've only got so much screen space to assign to the various buttons that would otherwise be present on a controller or keyboard, so the game's combat is simple by necessity. I feel like these limitations work out a lot better for Honkai Star Rail, since that's a turn-based RPG, but in a genre known for its dynamic moment-to-moment combat, it just doesn't work for Zenless Zone Zero. The main gameplay variety that you can expect comes from the playable characters, which are, of course, what you will be gambling in order to obtain. Some of them offer unique gimmicks on paper, but in my experience, you really don't need to play any of them dramatically different from one another to progress efficiently. It is, to be blunt, pretty mindless. Finding the optimal equipment for each agent doesn't change how you play them, you'll just start seeing marginally bigger damage numbers. Oh, and by the way, that optimal equipment, you gamble for that too. So the actual combat is not one of the game's standout qualities, but somehow it's the most fun part of the main story mode. There is so much time spent on this same dialogue screen, both while on missions and in between. You will have dialogue, be given back control of your character to walk 10 meters, then get drawn back into another dialogue sequence, which makes the option of skipping cutscenes basically ineffective. You might be asking why I'm skipping cutscenes in the first place. First of all, it's incentivized if you want to get more in-game currency as quickly as possible, but also, I just don't think the story is interesting or worth giving this obscene amount of time to. Zenless Zone Zero's story feels, in a word, directionless. If I can theorize cynically for a second, I think the main story mode serves 2 purposes. First, it is meant to introduce you to the various characters that you'll be gambling for, and make them look as cool or funny or cute as possible to effectively sell you on them. The events that lie between these encounters, between the protagonists and the agents, don't particularly matter. It's about getting from point A to B. Secondly, and the reason why I think it's so drawn out, is so that Hoyoverse can claim that the game technically gives out free currency while distributing it in a way that is so time consuming and frankly unfun that people just get frustrated and open their wallets now that they've already stepped through the front door. The truly unfortunate part is that I think there are some pretty charming characters in this cast. It's obvious that a lot of time and effort went into their visual designs as well as into animating them, and the voice actors do a great job, and some of their personalities are quirky enough to be at least mildly amusing. Some of my favorite moments from my time with Zenless Zone Zero were the smaller moments hanging around the hub city with the characters. This is reflected in the vast majority of discussions surrounding the game online. It tends to just be memes and fan art of the characters, some of which is actually really great, and I certainly don't want to alienate any of those people or undermine their efforts. If it brings you joy, please keep creating it. Take the inspiration you're given and run with it. But I just can't bring myself to touch this game anymore. I've pulled the characters I wanted, most of which I can't even fully interact with until I progress more of the main story, and that's just not going to happen. Zenless Zone Zero isn't the worst game I've ever played, but it is one that has left me with a feeling of emptiness. Maybe if the game was a flat $60 and had every character unlockable with more fleshed out combat and social features and wasn't pushed to smartphones, it could have been an enjoyable experience, albeit nothing groundbreaking. But walking away now, I sort of just feel like I wasted my time. The corporate influences just ran too deep in this game's DNA. Despite impressive visual work done by what I'm sure are very hardworking and passionate artists, Zenless Zone Zero as a whole feels like it falls more in line with being a product than it does a genuine expression of art. And that's not just bad, it's also a shame.